Atul Punj is credited for building one of India's largest construction companies, Punj Lloyd. When he inherited the company in the 1990s, it was deep in debt. While he had the family name, he really had no money or support to fall back on. He took Punj Lloyd in a new direction, overseas, and that's where Lady Luck found him. Today, the company has operations in over 20 countries and has the maximum global exposure among Indian construction companies. We talked to Atul on getting the company going and the art of surviving difficult times. So tell us a little bit more about your early days when you first began. It was a challenge. You got thrown into the deep end. What was that like?
It was interesting because I really came from a business family. So technically, I was not an entrepreneur, a first-generation entrepreneur. But I found myself in a situation which probably was worse than that of a first-generation entrepreneur. The reason I say that is, typically when you start out and try to establish yourself in business, if you don't make it, go back to your job. I was never ever of a mindset to ever work for somebody. So there was no choices. So here you are, a third-generation businessman, perceived to be wealthy, living at a good address, but actually hugely in debt. So it was managing those contradictions and keeping the perception alive, was, I think, one of the most interesting periods of one's life. Of course, in our business, which is construction, you need to really target and wait for that one really good project, which is really profitable, which will really wipe out all your past sins. And unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, that when 90 to 93, India was in serious financial trouble. There was no work, which is when we went outside to Indonesia, which was where we really got our first breakthrough. And that just became the mood of the company, the DNA of the group now. We all think international. We don't hesitate to go to a new geography, a new country, dealing with local dynamics, local cultures. We're quick to sense it, quick to adapt it. And I think that's really what's made the difference between us and most other Indian groups. We try to fly on our own. We try not to go on the back of, so far at least, any big government aid, etc. But I think as we find the competitive scape changing now, particularly when we compete with the Chinese, who have massive amounts of government funding that supports their companies, I think we won't have much of a choice but to try to get more and more of that aid level going out of India or other countries that we are registered out of.
Okay, so that is something you will need more of going forward?
I suspect so. When you get to the big ticket projects, there's a huge need for project finance now. So I think that is, the writing is clearly on the wall.
But it's slowing down at the same time. So do you see that actually happening?
No, it's not slowing down. I think we tend to broad brush what's happening in the world with events in the US and in Western Europe. I think the Middle East is fine. With oil being north of $70, $80, you're not seeing any pullback in spending. In fact, you're seeing a huge rollout of social programs now. So projects like housing, hospitals, highways, power plants, water desal plants, these are all running apace. So we're not seeing any real pullback there. In sub-Saharan Africa, you see a need for financing. And that is a major focus for us now. But I think governments there have also evolved. So they're more friendly in terms of the contract terms being financeable, which many countries in the beginning really talked down till they realized that there's no space of talking down. You've got to talk at the same level to everybody.
Also, when you were dealing with some of these perceptions in the beginning, while building the company, any instances or anecdotes that stand out, perhaps moments when people didn't believe in you, maybe even within the group? Were there occasions when you had to really push your case forward or stand by a decision that people didn't agree with?
I think the biggest challenge really was when we got our first project. There was no issue on the client side, but then the banking system shut down on us. And in our business, unless you get the performance guarantees, advance payment guarantees, you have a problem. And really, there were two people who played a key role in that. One was, she was in ICICI Delhi, Mrs. Ramani Nirula, who got me to meet the then CMD of ICICI, Mr. Vagu. And it was these two people, I think, that were instrumental in getting my first facilities. This at a time when ICICI was not a bank. It was a development financial institution. So we had to take facilities from them, then give it to, I think it was Greenleaf's Bank, and then on to the customer. So that, I think, was the most trying time because that came on the back of knocking on probably 50 banks' doors. I would meet junior managers, chairman, MDs, managers, whoever would meet me, I would meet them.
So what kept you going at that time? Was there ever a
It was
point where you just wanted to give up,
No,
or there was no choice?
There was no
or-
choice. In my mind, there was no choice. I guess there's always a choice, but in my mind, not getting it was not an option. But yeah, I think we were close to getting a termination notice for that particular project when we finally managed to get this, thanks to these two people. And since then, I dare say the relationship we've had with ICICI, which is now a bank, has really been special.
So in a way, also you've pretty much founded the group. Would you agree, or were there also other people that sort of mentored you, or that were there for support?
No, I think I was too brash to take any mentorship really for the longest time.
So why so brash? Were you young and ambitious, or were you overconfident?
I think both. I think it's probably a combination, partly stupid. So I think anybody who decides to jump off the deep end has to have that element of risk-taking ability. And who knows what happens. And we've seen, groups come out of nowhere and groups vanish into thin air as well. So both are equally true. The important thing is, I think from our point of view, we grew very, very fast. I think one of the publications was at Business World, or somebody put us as the second fastest growing company in the last 10 years. The problem with that is when you stretch, you have little room for movement. And I think what really set us back by about a year was this whole Libya blow up, which hopefully now is behind us. But there is an element of brashness, there's an element of madness. But you've got to temper it as you get bigger and bigger. You've got to pull back on that in that dimension.
Any learnings along the way when you say temper it? Anything that strikes you in terms of an incident that you remember?
No, I think I think the one place where we didn't get it right was an acquisition which we did, which ended up in the company in the UK, which went bad on us. But there again, the choices were as follows. We could have put that company into administration early on, but then in our business, you get a reputation of being only good where you're making a profit, and that you will run the moment you see a loss. And in our business, you can't get that reputation. So the choice was getting financially hammered in the markets. Okay, the analysts, of course, have their own point of view, which is they're fine where they sit. But from where we sit, okay, it is critical to be able to deliver a promise to a customer. And as much pain as it did cause us, we had to go the course. The embarrassment for us was that we were kept getting hit with surprise on surprise. So credibility, of course, took a knock. But I mean, I'm a firm believer that 1, 2, 3 quarters of consistent performance will recover that, almost as quickly as we lost it.
But when you say surprise on surprise, you didn't anticipate these kind of problems?
No. I think there was an element of the work ethic in the UK. It was a bit of racism, if I may say so. It was a combination of poor management. So it was the perfect storm, in a sense.
Would you do it differently if you had a choice now?
Oh yeah, I would not even think of doing any work in Western Europe or in North America, where there is construction involved, where you're dealing with unions, etc. If it's engineering kind of work, not a problem. But actually trying to take on EPC responsibility, LSTK responsibility in the West is an absolute no-no. So definite learning.